May 24th, 2023. Well, get back into the issue of the Ukraine war. There's been some development since the last time I touched it. Uh, this time, I think the Russians really have taken Bakhmut. So uh, we've had a few false alarms on that one, and we have to hand it to the Ukrainians. They held out very, very well and fought to the bitter end. And apparently, this last set of offensives we saw on the flanks were probably primarily designed to relieve pressure and open escape routes so that their dedicated units that were still fighting in there would have a chance to escape rather than turning it into kind of an Alamo type scenario. So, so apparently they've retreated now outside of the area and have established a new defense line. Uh, 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 you know, So, um, and at the same time, I guess it looks like that I've heard some reports the weather is starting to get rainy, so it may not be good for mobile operations, and that the Wagner Group apparently thinks it's time for them to get some R&R. That the job they were commissioned to do has been completed, and so I guess they're going to be rotated out, and regular Russian infantry will be rotated in to hold a defensive position there. There still are some, Ukrainian advances on the flanks, but they seem to run into pretty strong Russian defenses. And what looked like, oh, the Russians are running. In fact, what was going on, that was kind of what they were intended to do. They had forward positions to basically screening positions, and once they were effectively assaulted by superior forces, their job was to run, not to sit there and get killed. and to fall back to more suitable defensive positions which have been prepared. So that it seems like this kind of come to a kind of a conclusion there. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians, in order to prevent this thing from getting all the headlines, apparently decided to launch an attack into Belgorod, villages that are on the right across the border near there, not into the city itself. And apparently they were able to have some success for a day until the Russians sent in a reaction force. And I've heard that inflicted something like 70 casualties on a group of about 200, and I guess the rest of them have fled back into Ukraine. This group was purported to be a group of Russians that are against the Russian Putin government and have joined up with the Ukrainians and are supplied and armed by them to be part of their group. It's unclear whether that's really true or not, but it sounds like kind of like a Ukraine's attempt to do a kind of a mini Bay of Pigs to try to see if they could provoke some kind of revolt inside of Russia, which have obviously failed. And on the other hand, I think it's just a way to change the headline. A lot of this is about the propaganda line in the West, that keep the image up, keep the money coming, keep the weapons coming, and of course that probably this success probably has led to the announcement that they're going to eventually supply F-16 fighters to Ukraine. Although it's unclear what F-16s they're going to get. It looks like there may be some from some of the European countries which are now buying F-35s. So I guess they can take some of the old F-16s that are in their inventories, they replace them with F-35s and eventually provide them to Ukraine. And of course, the initial action will be training some of the pilots. But in addition to pilots, we have to remember they also need highly trained ground crews to operate these things. We're far more numerous than pilots. So this is as a project. And the question is that if they bring out the people they have now that are operating their Russian equipment, who will be fighting the war in the meantime? So it is a dilemma how that will be handled, but we'll wait and see how that turns out. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. We need to get more subscriptions here. We're still stuck at the level we've been at for a while. It'd be good to get some new ones. And of course, any comments are appreciated. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're looking at the thing at the moment. One of the things I keep hearing is that this British Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State for Defense over there, Wallace, it keeps saying things like Russia has committed 97% of their army into Ukraine right now, and I'm like, I think that's nonsense. That would be a strategic blunder of incredible proportions if that were true. It's Russia always seems to maintain reserves, and I think the numbers of troops they have are such that I think they do have a substantial reserve. In fact, to deal with this upcoming Ukraine offensive when and if it happens. Um, I think there's still some issues there, and the weather may not be really right, and so forth. In fact, we'll just have to see how that turns out. On the other hand, like I said, I've said previously that I think I mentioned that in one of the videos that I saw this picture of a video segment where uh, there's a big line of new modern Russian tanks, more modern Russian tanks, probably T-90s, something or others, or whatever. Some of those models all lined up, and Grisomov, I think it was reviewing them or something, looking at them. So I get the feeling that there really is some much more capable Russian forces in reserve that might be committed if and when the Ukrainian offensive is launched. And so I think that people are being a little naive about this whole thing. I mean, um, although it's unclear whether Russia plans to pursue an offensive on their own first, or like I've said before, that they may prefer to receive the Ukrainian offensive and defeat it before they actually commit to their own counteroffensive. Um, because that might actually put them in a better position. However, I guess the Bakhmut is a crossroads, so it would be a jumping off point for future offensive operations if and when they plan to engage in such. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen probably in the next few weeks at least from the Russian side. The Ukrainians may very well go first. But I think this idea that the Russians are totally, at the end of their manpower level is probably wrong. Because I tend to believe that some of these older tanks that are being refurbished and put into operation are actually there to be part of the screening forces and fire support for infantry units and not major armored combat units. In other words, if you're just using it to, shoot at enemy positions, to provide fire support with high explosive shells, these old tanks will really do quite well for that approach. And if they're destroyed, um, you won't be losing a modern tank. So for that, and certainly it's not those kind of operations are not very suited to heavy armored warfare anyhow. They're to some degree, so they may be useful for certain, you know, weaker areas in the line and so forth. But I think people are being naive if they think that that's the end of the Russian capability there. Plus, the Russian air power is continuing to be a more significant factor as the Ukrainian air defenses have been worn down. Now, another interesting question we should get into, we're still a little bit at a loss on what happened on that coordinated attack on the Patriot battery at Kiev. Um, I mean, because we have conflicting stories, it's pretty clear cut that all 18 missiles were not shot down. At least 2 of them did penetrate because the big explosions on the ground were quite notable. And the question is, what did they hit? I mean, if they hit some ancillary thing that would, like, say, one of the rocket launcher systems, that, missile launchers, I should call it, that would be a minor loss, which would probably be quickly replaced. But if the major, ground control, the radar system were to be hit in that would be a major loss of the battery. That'd be a much more expensive item to replace and would probably be, a bigger loss because individual missiles themselves are basically being fired anyhow. So the launcher itself is hardware, but it's not. I'm sure we could replace that fairly easily. So anyhow, that's kind of, we still don't have a good handle on what really happened there. Um, so, however, I haven't heard any more talk of it shooting down anything lately, but maybe there's no. We'll see. Anyway, that's another item that we'll be kind of keeping track of. And so I'll be wrapping this one up for now. As always, I'll be posting it on Rumble as well as on YouTube here, and my social media accounts are listed in the description below. And until next time.